I'm here with Damon Palmer, Pasture and Land Management Business Leader at Corteva Agriscience. Damon, thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks for having us, Kate.
So as we look forward to the start of a new grazing season, what are you hearing from producers across the country?
Well, we've got team spread out across the country, and so as the team talks to cattle ranchers, cattle producers, they're hearing a lot of optimism. And as I reflect being in this industry, cattle producers, ranchers, they're so resilient because you come through something like the record winter impact we had in the Southwest this year, whether it's a wildfire, ranchers come out of that optimistic. And I think there's a level of optimism as we come into the spring. And that's buoyed, I think, by some very good things that they're seeing in the industry. When you look at cattle numbers, cattle prices, things seem to be positive. A lot of that's driven from an expectation of exports that continue to be up in 2021 and imports that'll be down. So hopefully there's some good supply and demand things that are in cattle producers' favor this year. And a lot of that is driven by just the high quality product that they're producing. I think some of the last numbers I saw, 80% of beef being produced now is prime or choice. And I think that's up from mid-60s just 10 years ago. So that good quality product is driving some good demand signals and providing some optimism. Now, as we talk to producers, there's always some things that they're concerned about. And we know that there's a good portion of the country that is dry right now. There's a concern of a looming drought, which that's often a concern. But you also couple that with some rising input costs like fertilizer, like grain, and so that's on producers' minds as well.
So you bring up a lot of good points about things that are out of producer control, mainly the weather and drought conditions. How can grazing and pasture and forage land management sort of help producers manage through some of those tough conditions?
Yeah, well, the pasture is normally the single largest asset or most valuable asset that a rancher has. And so good grass management, good pasture management can go a long way in helping offset some of those challenges, especially related to feed costs. And so producers really need to look at what they can do to maximize that grass production and keep cattle out on the pasture longer, optimize stocking rates, and things like that through an array of management practices.
So Damon, I hear a lot of producers refer to themselves as grass farmers, which is really, really true. Why should producers think of maybe their beef-based pasture operation in those kind of terms?
Yeah, so I think producers are really wired well to look at return per head. And that is a good metric to look at on the operation. But as we've dealt with some academics and talked to some ranchers themselves, there's a good balance in looking at return per head and return per acre. And if you look at per head only, I think one great example is that you could have a really good per head metric, but you would be underutilizing your pasture. And so if you can look at those two metrics together, I think that provides a more optimal way to manage the operation. And I think that's just one example of coming at it from a grass farmer mentality, is incorporating some of those metrics and management techniques in the operation.
Yeah, and we're going to take a deeper dive later in the show into some specifics, but maybe what's some high-level advice that you could give producers as the grass starts to get green?
Yeah, so as the grass starts to get green, and here in Indiana, we're a few weeks from that, as you can see, but as the grass starts to get green, I'd really focus in a few areas. Number one, making sure you've got a good grazing management plan, and you're tweaking and adapting that for what's going on the land currently. Make sure that's not something that you put together and file away. You continually update that and make sure that it's tweaked with the latest conditions. The second thing is look at fertilization. I realize with fertilization that can oftentimes be seen as an input cost. Make sure you look at that as an investment because there's a return that comes from that as well. And then the last thing would be weed control. And we know that weeds can rob that precious forage that you've got out there. And so a pound of weeds removed is going to be a pound of forage returned. And so making sure that those are kind of the three high-level areas to look at really to maximize pasture on an operation.
Thanks, Damon. That's really great advice, and we're going to talk to you a lot more during this show.